Welcome, everyone, to the November 9th City Council work session. I'm going to just start out by making a statement, and then we'll ease on into the work session. So I just want to say this, that in every election, there's disappointment and there's joy, and then there's a peaceful transition of power. For those of you who live here and have many fears today, I want you to know we have your back. We are a warm-hearted, inclusive community, and we will work hard to continue being that way. Thank you. All right. Work session item on downtown update.
Thanks, Mayor, and I'll turn over to Sarah.
Great. Hi, I'm Sarah Maderi. For those at home, I'm the Assistant City Manager, and I'm joined at the table today with Chief Pete Kearns. Chief Kearns and I and Deputy Attorney Catherine Brotherton also were part of what's the downtown policy team, which also includes Christy Hammett and Renee Gruby from LRCS. I'm going to give just kind of a quick update that's going to go through a lot of the information that was in your packet, but I'm going to start with just a little history and context because, as you know, we've been talking about downtown, I think, in this community for a long time, and a couple of key points for me just in my career and leadership here really starts back to Eugene counts, and when we first started talking in 2009 about what kinds of outcomes we wanted to see in downtown and the community, downtown came up a lot, and there was a lot around wanting increased sense of safety, increased police presence. We wanted increased development, support for local businesses, more arts and culture, and there was kind of a downtown theme that really rang true. And kind of along that same time, we started talking about a safety committee. And so when I went back through the notes, it was actually November 23rd of 2009 that Chief Kearns and Susan Muir, who was the Planning and Development Director, were here talking to you about some of the recommendations that came out of that safety committee. And a lot of the concerns were very, very much the same. There was concerns around behavior, lack of accountability and consequences, lack of a cohesive and coordinated plan, and some concerns about physical space and environments. We've done a lot since 2009. I think, as you know, we filled the pits, which I think we all thought was something that was unachievable at the time, but now, you know, people that come to town don't even know about the pits, except for people like me that just keep reminding them. And we've made a lot of investments. We've made over $500 million of investment in downtown since we first had those conversations about Eugene counts. And in that, we've brought new development. We've brought redevelopment of some really cool buildings like the old Taco Time building. We've brought in new housing, lots of new businesses, new jobs, and I think a lot of exciting vitality. And yet, we found ourselves again last December at the Downtown Solutions Forum hearing some of the same concerns about hopes for downtown and how everyone can feel included and safe, and also some concerns about what that means and different ideas about how that plays out. So the downtown safety team, staff, and working with different downtown merchants and just anybody really who's come and said, we want to talk about this, we've been trying to put together a list of things we've either implemented or in progress and things that you might still want to consider as a council. And instead of bringing those to you, you know, on one-by-one work sessions, we thought it would be helpful to talk about the full range of options, even though we know some of them are going to be more or less popular across the council. So I'm just going to kind of go through the categories in which we talked about it at the Solutions Forum and talk about some of the things that we've done. So around the downtown safety and social services, I think you all know about the COURT program, which was a new partnership with Cahoots, Lane County Mental Health, and Whitebird. This is was a opportunity to say we're not going to be able to arrest ourselves out of a problem. We see people, EPD, we're seeing people in the streets, they really wanted to help. And the latest statistics that I had seen is that they had helped 40 people in just 135 hours get to services they needed, and at least a quarter of those people were actually housed back with stable housing. This year, we started the community court, which there's people around the table that know more details about this than I do, but this is also another opportunity to really connect people into a system that's not just the public safety system. And really started up in September and is growing even as of mid-October. We said we wanted to increase cahoots, and as you know, we increased the budget last year to increase even more hours, and we've added more and more cahoots since 2010 as well. Talked about we've increasing our police presence. You know, we added the downtown team, we've added a downtown station, but this was more specific to even some of the more recent this summer to really increase police presence and visibility in downtown, even as recently as the last week. Animal Services has done a lot of outreach and education, especially with low-income and homeless individuals, to help them understand the different services that are available for them and their pets. They've partnered with Pro Bono to help get free licenses at the Pro Bono facility. We talked about installing a donation meter, and we did install one, and the proceeds of that go to St. Vincent de Paul. And then, as you saw in your packet, there's a whole list of additional strategies that include everything from peer-to-peer support specialists, day use or homeless shelter, ramping up and continuing the community outreach response team. Sorry, I'm stumbling over that. It's a lot of words. That was done as a pilot, and we know it was very effective. And, you know, the possibility of continuing increased police presence. These are all things, as we said in the AIS, we're going to continue exploring these unless there's something that happens today where you say, we actually don't want you to continue talking about these. And then security camera park blocks is highlighted, and we'll come back to that at the end because that's a group of set of things that we'd actually like you to talk about more specifically today. When we get to the Park Plaza facilities item, as you know, as part of the urban renewal, most recent amendment and some of the projects you want to do around the park blocks in downtown, we've done an RFP and contracted with Project for Public Spaces. They've been in town doing a number of workshops, a lot of engagement and outreach, and we are expecting them to come back with a draft set of strategies for how we really can increase vibrancy sometime in early February. As you know, the farmers market, permanent year-round space, continues to be something that's very popular in our community, and we're working really hard right now to meet a deadline of next week to give you some options for how we might be able to do that in our coordinated development with Lane County and the farmers market and the court. We wanted to see more lighting in Kesey Square. We've done that. We've put some great LED lights that actually light up the space, but they're not too obtrusive, and I think they've been pretty popular. And we've done a lot of improvements to the park block landscaping. Some of these were really good, just horticultural improvements to the plants and shrubs, and it also lightened it up and increased and improved sightlines. There's a whole bunch more additional strategies we're pursuing around the work that Project for Public Spaces is doing in the downtown. We're looking at ways as part of that we can improve lighting temporarily and long-term in the park blocks. A lot of discussion about just increasing the cleanliness of downtown. So we clean, you know, some of the specific areas around the parks and city facilities, but there's kind of an overall desire to see that ramp up across downtown in the alleys and sidewalks. So we'll be looking at that. Updating and kind of cleaning up the sidewalk and public space commerce rules. We're continuing to hear desire for secure attended storage and some of the, and then there was a couple of ideas that keep coming forward around structural changes to the park blocks, and we're trying to be really specific here. There's issues with accessibility, the different types of pavement, the awnings. There's a lot of things that are things that people love about the park blocks are also things that cause problems. And so we're going to be exploring making some structural changes, including removing the awnings. And also we'll be asking you later to consider a temporary closure of some of those areas in the short term. Programming, a lot have said, you know, we just need to program our spaces more. And so this is just a compilation of photographs of all the different things that happened really even since the Downtown Solutions Forum. As you know, there was a kickoff of Huge Fun, and they did a bunch of things in the Holt Center in Kesey Square. They had kids on Holt Plaza on Tuesdays, programming on Kesey on Wednesdays, party on the Holt Plaza Thursdays, grown-up recess and Holt Plaza on Fridays, movies in the square. in August. Downtown Sunday Streets in July was the largest event they've had to date with more than 6,000 participants. Fiesta Cultural in September was another huge fun event with more than 2,000 participants. And the All Hallows event, if you were down here on Halloween, was amazing. There were kids and people and pets everywhere trick-or-treating, lots of excitement that night. This last Friday, First Friday Art Walk was also very popular, and the Light Up Downtown event's coming on November 18th, so we have that to look forward to. Additional strategies will be to continue to do that, and we know that this will be something that comes out of the Project for Public Spaces, that it's really how we use those spaces that makes them feel really safe and vibrant. There's an idea around small grant programs. We're talking about a bike sharing facility in a public space. You'll get this kind of lighter, quicker, cheaper. I think it is around being able to be flexible and quick in our responses. We've heard you say, can't we just do something quicker, faster? And so that, I think, is continuing to see how we can do that. And then there's a discussion about, do we need a downtown manager? You know, somebody that's really I always call it the dean of downtown, but it's somebody that's really like pure soul-focused, private-public partnership is in how we manage the downtown. Around the health issues, there was a desire for more restrooms, and as you know, we closed several of the parking structure restrooms because they were very unsafe and very unsanitary, and in response, we put out 5 portable ADA accessible restrooms. The intent was to put them in different locations, have it be flexible, move them around, see how it works, and see if there are certain locations that rise to the top. We think this has been helpful. There's still also some issues. We still, our staff still report numbers of incidents in the downtown that suggest that they're not using necessarily all of these. So it's better, but it's not ideal. And what we know and what you'll see us wanting to explore is the idea of attended restrooms, which from other cities seems to be the most successful. Another health issue is really around smoke-free areas. We explored this with you in the past and talked about, the possibility of a smoke-free downtown. It's one of the most populated where people are walking around. It's very hard to find a place where there's not smoking. We've explored that with you. We haven't brought back a set of options, but in the meantime, smoke-free parks have happened. So we've seen a lot of positive response from that. The community was, I think, 95% in support of a smoke-free park. We wanted to see more way stations, and when I say we, I'm saying community because I'm also part of the community, but we wanted to see more way stations, and we've installed 10 of these around the downtown. Additional strategies, as I said, are attended restrooms. There's been discussion about whether and where you could put potentially needle drop boxes, and we want to talk to you more about expanding the smoke-free areas and the possibility of requiring license for all dogs when they come downtown. Amenities, we asked for more park benches and more seats, and we have installed cafe seating in Kesey Square, and we installed, I think, up to 10 benches around the downtown. Some of those we've actually already had to remove because there was such a negative response to us installing them there, and we felt like we need to go back out and do a little bit more conversation and buy-in on where we put them and make sure we're not causing the alternate opposite effect of what we're trying to accomplish. And public art, we've had as you know, I think the 20 by 21 mural project, where this is an aspiration of having 20 really international and exemplary artists install in 20 different locations before the 2021 World Championships or World Track and Field Championships. Is this the back of the Bijou? Yeah. Okay.
No,
McDonald.
Right, sorry. We've continued to really curate and try to keep food carts in Kesey Square, and that's been working really well, and I think the turnover has been a little bit up and down since 2009, but the group that's in there seems to be pretty stable.
Okay.
Still very popular. We're also working with another international consultant on wayfinding. So as John pointed out, we don't have a seafront within walking distance of downtown. But this is a sample of the kind of work they're doing. This is a really quality graphic design firm that's really proposed. I think they may have just given us an initial proposal on how we can make it more easy for people to find their way around downtown in the city.
Say waterfront.
And we're moving forward with the high-speed fiber project, and we can talk more about that as that project goes on. You've had more information about that than others. So additional strategies, we know we're going to get the project for public spaces recommendations in February, and we'll bring that to you for more thoughts on how we might implement some of those. And we've heard continued desire for more outdoor lighting and some discussion around traffic pattern analysis, and this really has to do with some work in current theory around really creating vibrancy by making more one-way streets two-way streets. And so we're looking at some of the streets around downtown to see if there's ways we can use really simple ways of changing traffic patterns to make it more accessible. So that's a lot, and we gave you a long list of possible things to think about, and I think what we landed on was there's a few areas where there's either a timing and urgency around when we might do something that it would be helpful to get more specific direction from you, and that would be around installing potentially security cameras on the park blocks and the idea of being able to temporarily close portions of the park blocks to respond to issues that are happening. Those are more time sensitive, and so it'd be good to talk about them. And then the other two are items that we've brought to you before, so expanded smoke-free areas and licensure required for all dogs downtown that are kind of ready to be scheduled for another work session or public hearing. And so we just would be helpful to know if you're interested in doing that. So those were kind of the four we thought could start, but it's really your meeting for discussion. We're here to answer
Thank you.
any and all questions.
Great. So I've got Mike in the queue. Anybody else want to be part of the queue? Chris, George, Claire, Alan, Betty. Okay, Mike.
Thank you, Mayor. First of all, thank you for all the hard work. All the attention to downtown, I think, is paying off. There's a lot more people, especially people who work downtown, who are renewing their energy and trying to be a part of the solution. I think that's a good thing. With specific respect to these things, I'm fine with the first two. I'm not crazy about them, frankly, but if it's necessary for the sake of public safety and your efforts to continue well, then okay, fine. I want to have the more difficult conversation, though, a little bit. It requires some context. I may need a second round. First piece of context is, for me, there is a gigantic difference between homelessness, which is a state or a condition, and antisocial behavior, which is how people act. Now, you've done a great job of talking about some of the things we can do that will make the environment more inviting. But we're being very general when we talk about increased police presence, because the only thing the police can do is enforce the laws that exist about what people can and can't do downtown. What we aren't talking about are behavioral related issues that make a lot of people in our community feel uncomfortable about coming downtown, or in some cases unwelcome. The antisocial behavior is a piece that I think we need better policy tools for, and that we're not talking about well enough or distinctively enough. And it's not it frustrates and makes me sad when people want to confuse the issue of homelessness and antisocial behavior by lumping them together. They're not the same thing. Nobody wants to criminalize people who are homeless. Nobody does. Nobody at this table, nobody involved in the leadership of the city wants to do that. But I think a majority of people would like to restrict, to limit, to get less of some of the antisocial behavior we see downtown. And that doesn't maybe rise to the level of criminality that the police department has to contend with. So I'm not exactly sure how we talk about the policy tools around that, but the mayor's done a wonderful job of saying that, panhandling isn't something you can outlaw. It's protected speech, and she's right. In Roseburg and in some other cities, they've tried to come up with creative policies to limit that. I don't know if any of those policies are right for Eugene. I'm not suggesting they are. But I'm saying we at the council table need to have a conversation about how do we have effective policies for limiting antisocial behavior downtown in order to make it a more welcoming place for everybody. And I would like a second round, Mayor.
Chris?
Thank you. Actually, to kind of continue on with that thought, I'm one of the folks that talks a lot about conditioned behavior, and what I want to focus on now are those elements whereby changing a condition you can affect behavior, and so they are. That's, I think, where we can get enormous traction. And so I agree we need to manage inappropriate behavior, but we also need to recognize that some behavior could actually be positively affected by some conditional things we can do. And by condition, I mean some infrastructural things we could do. And so, for example, physical service-related things we could do. And the physical one that occurs to me right off would be an emphasis on creating short-term shelter opportunities for people without shelter, people who have to sleep on the street or sleep somewhere else. Part of the reasoning for that is if somebody, because they don't have any place else, wants to flop down on the sidewalk and go to sleep, that's a behavior, but it's a result of a condition. And if we could actually provide a shelter bed for that person, they would no longer need to flop down on the sidewalk. They would no longer be disruptive, and other perhaps behavioral aspects could also be relieved. So what I'm getting at is there are certain behaviors that we absolutely do need to manage. Illegal drugs, prostitution, theft, exploitation, intimidation, fighting. You know, maybe some infrastructure things could affect that, but there are other behaviors we just simply cannot tolerate. So I agree. There are certain behaviors we need to identify and say, we will not tolerate this behavior. But I think there are other behaviors where if we're smart, we can say, you know what, if we create this infrastructure, that behavior will go away. If we can provide shelter beds, and I keep coming back to that because I think if we could provide shelter beds, that could have a big impact on all of the behavioral issues we want to try to manage. Would be I think a great way to get double impact for the effort we want to do. So I guess what I'm saying in kind of summary is I think these are great things to talk about, but I want to talk about them in a balanced conversation that says I want to see behavior-related steps, and I love to have this conversation, but I don't want to not have that conversation without also talking about conditional things we can do. Shelter beds, service opportunities, physical infrastructure. I know that's a more expensive thing, but actually certain behavioral management is also an expensive thing. So we're talking about money no matter what we do here. So I just want to spend the money wisely and get the biggest bang for the buck. And I don't have a prejudice as to which side of that equation the money's spent, as long as we get the benefit.
Okay, next up is George.
Thanks, Mayor. Thank you for the presentation. I'm going to start off with some questions. On the very first page of attachment A, in the center column under description, this is about the community outreach response team. It says the goals of the pilot program are to address underlying needs of highest utilizers, the most chronic and highest utilizers of services. Who exactly does that refer to? Sorry? Who does that refer to? Highest utilizers of these are people that are being visited by the police?
Police,
More often
emergency medical services, Lane County Behavioral Health, Buckley House.
I see. Okay. All right. And then if you go one column to the right, it says 25% of the team worked with 40 clients. I assume those are highest utilizers. And 25% were successfully housed. That's great. Reunited with family and or community supported shelters, but that leaves 30 of the initial. And so I'm wondering, they're still there, right? Still being high utilizers. Was that because there were only room for 10 people, or did some of them choose not to accept help that was offered?
Yes, there was any range of assistance that was provided. For instance, it's pretty disabling to not have official identification.
Yeah.
So we were able to help provide or gain identification for some of the people who needed it. Not everyone wants to be housed. Some folks were not willing
I
or
understand
interested in that, but
Yeah.
they did receive other services. So it was the range of service, and some of the successes included people who are now in housing.
Okay. Well, I think this kind of relates to, because there's more than 40 people out there, high utilizers, and I think this kind of connects with what Councilor Pryor was just saying about, I really think that if we get on the stick here and open up more safe spots and provide places for people to go, homeless people to go, some of these other higher utilizers maybe are causing problems because they simply have no place to go that's safe at night, and not all of them, but some. And so I think the sooner the council moves on that, that'll really help kind of, the atmosphere downtown, and it will help those people with their lives, having a safe place to go and being in contact with social services. And we already know that, the safe spots, it's not the final stop for people. A lot of people have recycled through there and gone on to find permanent housing and jobs, and just kind of like they were intended to do. So the more resources we can dedicate there, because we've seen the results. We've seen that they work, and they're not problematic. They actually help people. So the more that we could do there, the better. I've got a question on the second page about the donation meters. What can you give me some idea of how much has been collected? Has it been successful?
It's really low. I don't know the number, but it's pretty low.
Okay.
You might know better because it's.
Well, I know it's right in front of my place of
It's like,
employment.
it might be
but-
less than 100.
I see. Well, I think it was a really great thing to try. Hopefully,
It's just getting started. So
yeah, and maybe this will publicize it a little bit, and people will be a little more generous when they're walking down Olive Street. I'll need another round, Mayor. Thank you.
Claire?
Thank you. Well, thanks for the update. I'm encouraged, cautiously encouraged by the strategies that we've been implementing, the court team and the community court. Obviously, this is a chronic and complex challenge, as you showed us in your introduction. And I recognize we're not the first council to try to tackle it. But I think that with dedicated effort, we can achieve our goals of creating a more welcoming environment for everyone who wants to spend time downtown. But it will take focus and dedication. Just a couple of random thoughts. I'm pleased to see those dog waste stations. The mayor has often said, if we want to encourage certain behaviors from people, we should make it easy for them to engage in those behaviors, and that's a really good example of that. I do have a question about the sidewalk easement. So this goes to whether a bar or restaurant has some sidewalk access, or if someone gets a permit to sell on the sidewalk. How does the responsibility of the property owner versus the city to keep that area clean and generally accessible to the public? And if you don't have an answer off the top of your head,
yeah.
you could get
So are you talking around commerce, or are you saying
Yes.
like outside of a business, what's their responsibility?
a little bit of both.
I mean, I think if I'm wrong, I'll come back and with a memo, but in general, we expect property owners to keep the area in front of their spaces clean. It's true of a home, it's true of a business. There's exceptions to that because we have areas where we run either the downtown crew or the DEI cleanup crew does some cleanup. But I think if it gets to the commerce piece, I'm not sure I can speak to that as well as you can.
So there's a variety of different downtown activity permits. We have the cafe seating permits, and obviously, and different businesses downtown have those. Sizzle Pie is a good example. They have those benches there. Obviously, it's their responsibility to keep that, and they keep that area clean underneath and all of that. So it really does depend on the type of permit that's being issued and the type of event that's going on there. But generally speaking, I mean, even with and cafe seating is a good example, even with the cafe seating, there's a certain, pathway of that public sidewalk that has to remain completely clear. They couldn't, someone couldn't decide, well, I'm going to just put my table right across the middle of it. So there's, when someone obtains a permit, there are these set of rules that go along with that explain it to them.
So, and I just bring that up because you mentioned a desire from folks have expressed to just to have downtown be physically more cleaner, which I agree with. And so I think there's an opportunity there for partnership with downtown businesses. I'm sure for the most part be very supportive of that effort, and anything we could do to support them in that, I think would be to our benefit. The public restrooms, kind of a little bit like the benches, but I think even more so are always going to present an ongoing challenge in terms of public safety and maintenance, but we need them. And I think we need to figure out strategies to make them viable and useful, and people want to use them when they need to, and have enough that people feel they can walk through downtown without being worried about that. And then I don't understand why the wayfinding is taking so long. We've been talking about putting up wayfinding downtown for a long time. I don't know if we're waiting for our grand plan to be complete or what, but I think that, to me, is one of those quicker things that we could do, and we could create something that can be changed out later when new things crop up and we want to change them. I'm kind of looking at Nan back there. And I think it might be a little bit similar dynamic to what staff has shared about that donation meter. Like, you can spend a lot of time and process trying to figure out who to send those donations to, and sometimes you just have to make a decision and say, this is what we're going to do, this is how it's going to look. May not be perfect, but we're going to get started on it. And I will take a second round, please.
Alan.
Isn't that we have the signs, we just can't find them? That's not the case. So I think we've done some really good stuff in the downtown area. Of course, we still need to do more work on the downtown. The park blocks do feel unsafe and are unwelcome, and I've heard from many people about that and experienced it myself. So I appreciate the added attention that's given there, the implementation of the tools and strategies, and the police presence. I'm not necessarily in support of the 4 next steps on the slide without further discussion, and I'm unclear about exactly what the ask is today. Is what you're asking us to do to give you direction about what to spend time on and effort on over the next 6 months? And is it just related to these next steps, or is it related to all the strategies and tools that are listed in the memo?
I'll answer the second part first. We're planning on continuing to analyze all of the strategies that we've put on there, unless you have something that you collectively say, we don't want you to work on this. And those might come back. So, for example, the attended restrooms could come back as a budget ask. I mean, as we get the information, we know what it costs. If we can't do it within our existing resources or reallocate our existing resources, you'll see it again. So there'll be a future decision point on several of these. Like, for example, a day use or homeless shelter is not something that we'll implement without you having a lot of discussion about that or figuring out how we're going to do that. These 4, and I think that we have some potential draft motions if you want to go forward, but I think the 4 we'd be looking for a motion from you that suggests that you support our moving forward with the security camera and the temporary closure. And then the other 2 would be a motion to bring back a work session and public hearing on the smoke-free areas, and the licensure requirement could be either a public hearing and a work session or just a public hearing on that specific item. So the first 2 is kind of a motion that you supported, and we're going to work on those things, and the other 2 is future work sessions.
Betty? I'm sorry. Go ahead.
So I'd need more, maybe you could describe the first 2 in more detail, and for us to have a conversation about whether or not we should move forward on those first 2, and then the other 2, bringing back information and analyzing it's okay with me. I'm interested in also all of these, there's numerous strategies, probably 20 strategies and tools listed here. Are they all going to be brought back for okay to implement, or some of them going to be implemented? How does that going to play out? What's the plan?
Okay, well, I'll answer the first part about the first two items on there. We've learned from studies that have been performed around the country that placing police security cameras in certain places will reduce crime in the area that the camera is focused on. So about a year ago, we asked the Police Commission to develop a policy for the use of security cameras for a pilot project. So we have that ready to go, and we would experiment with it in the park blocks, aiming the camera at the areas where we've seen the most crime. With the second item,
Do you intend to do what with the data that you get out of it, or the images?
yeah, the intent would be to see if it affected crime, the trends in crime there. And I don't know if it would, to be honest. I'm hopeful that it would, but none of the places in the studies that I've seen have had exactly the type of crime and in exactly the same conditions or circumstances and environment that we have there. So it would be good for us to find out if this would be something that would be useful here. And then if serious crime occurred, we would use the footage from the cameras which would be stored for a fixed period of time and deleted after a certain amount of time to help solve crime. The second area is that what we know from our crime prevention through environmental design is that the walls in the park and the structures, the awnings in the park encourage a gathering of people who engage in criminal behavior. And so our CEPTED experts recommend removing the walls and the awnings. What we're suggesting here is that we would close off those awnings so that they would no longer be in a place where criminal behavior is occurring.
24/7?
Yes. Well, apart from the times when it's needed for Saturday market and farmers market, that kind of thing.
With respect to all the other strategies, I'll just laundry list the ones that I have questions about. On page 2, day use or harmless shelter, there's a lot to discuss about that. Security cameras we talked about. Page 4, sidewalk and public space commerce rules. Temporary closure of areas in the park block we just talked about. Structural changes to the park blocks we just talked about. Downtown manager model, how would that work? What's the time frame for bike share downtown? Expanded smoke-free areas, question about that, or need to know more about it. Licensing of dogs downtown. I thought we already had that conversation about this, and my comment was, why just downtown? Seems too specific. Attended public restrooms, I don't even know exactly what that means. And then for amenities, more about the seating, and that was the ones that I had questions about.
Betty, you're up.
Thank you. First, I want to say what I think is good about this. I'm glad you're calling Kesey Square Kesey Square. That's a good thing, and I think we're going to finally vote on officially changing that next week. And the trash cans are good. I once spent 2 nights at the Hilton because things were being done at my house. My dog was with me, and it was really hard to find places, disposal places. We found them, but it was not easy. And I do think it's true that people will do the right thing if it's more likely to do the right thing if it's easy to do the right thing. Needle drop, how much could that cost?
I'm not certain on that.
Oh, it sounds like a good thing, but I wouldn't think it would cost a lot of money.
It might not.
And I think the tables and chairs are good, the ones in Kesey Square, except maybe they should be more attractive. What do you pick those up at night? Does somebody pick them up?
I believe that the food cart operators are putting them in storage at night. Yeah.
Oh, mm-hmm. I'd
They're
like
pretty
to see,
lightweight. They're easy to carry away.
I'd like to see something, yeah, that's what I wondered about, but I'd like to see something more substantial, movable but substantial. And then back to things I don't like. I do not think we should close the park at all. I don't think we should take away the shelters. People need shelter when it's raining. And just the fact that something bad happens there doesn't mean you should destroy it. I was really distressed when they took away the shelter at Charles Mulligan Park, actually, because it was a place where, and it does rain here sometimes, and people, it's nice for people to have a place to go in out of the rain without paying to go someplace. I think I'm skeptical about the cameras. I think people need privacy too sometimes, and might just be lovers meeting downtown, and they might not want to be photographed. I'm just skeptical about people being watched all the time. And the smoking, I think it's really good we stopped it in public places and restaurants and bars mostly. But I don't know, since people do smoke, I would want more of a discussion about stopping it in all of downtown. I think it's good it was stopped in the parks, though I have seen a lot of smoking in Amazon Park since it was stopped. But I don't feel that I have the police power to, I haven't felt brave to go up and tell them not to smoke. And why were the benches removed?
As I tried to explain,
You said
there were a couple of places that we put them that were received very negatively by some of the nearby neighbors. And
but do they have is it up to them to remove?
no, it's not. But we felt like, we feel like it's a partnership in how we manage that space, and that we could come back and reinstall them. We just needed a little bit more time to have some more conversations and make sure we had picked the right locations.
But they don't, the sidewalks do not belong to the adjoining merchant.
You're right.
So if they're there for the public, they shouldn't have the power to. I probably want another round. Thank you.
George?
Thank you. Thanks for the presentation. I appreciate what Mike said at the very start of this discussion about trying to distinguish between the homeless issue and antisocial behavior. Unfortunately, sometimes they get stuck together and people can't distinguish between the two. And I hope people heard what Mike said. That was a very good separation of the two activities. The security cameras, they're just there for monitoring or recording activity, not monitored by somebody. Is that correct?
Right. The policy, the draft policy now would not have them monitored. Instead, they'd be recorded, and we'd only access it if a crime occurred that was reported to us.
And that's public space that it's monitoring, is right?
Yes.
And then could those, under the pilot program, could those locations or angles of the cameras be changed based on crime data received by your department?
Yes, we could move them to wherever the crime is.
Okay. All right. The temporary closure of the areas in the park blocks, I understand that you're saying that it's just going to be the awning area will just be closed except for the, specific uses like the Saturday market, other activities going on downtown. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. I just want to make sure I'm hearing all these right. We've received a lot of comments recently about, and I'll use Mike's term, the antisocial behavior, the increased antisocial behavior in the park blocks area. And recently, since implementing the police presence down there, we're now starting to hear just about as many people saying, thank you, and as we like to come downtown now, we feel safe now. So I appreciate that effort that we're putting out there. The expanded smoking-free areas, we've had this discussion. I'm an ex-smoker, and now if I get within probably 10 feet of someone smoking a cigarette, it really affects me. But my concern is for the people that choose to smoke that have to work downtown, we still need to figure out, without making them go miles away to take their smoke break, that's their choice. So when we do have the discussion about expanding the smoke-free areas, we need to take in consideration those people's choices that they make, because we can't tell everybody, no, you can't smoke because you're stuck here working. And we have a lot of people that work downtown. And the licensure required for all dogs downtown, I agree with Alan. Why limit it to just downtown? I'm down to 2 dogs now, but I've got them licensed. I keep their license up to date. it's something that people should do. And then I think I read in an email or something, somebody raised the issue about, well, what if you're visiting from another community or another state? Is there going to be some kind of a waiver of time or something of that nature?
That's the clarifying piece. The dogs are required to be licensed in Eugene now. That is the law. The law currently provides, I think, a 5-day grace period if you're doing exactly what you're saying. You're traveling from out of town. What we're proposing and what we had proposed once before is that we eliminate the 5-day grace period for the downtown area, so that if you have a dog in the downtown area, it needs to be licensed. You can't be in that 5-day grace period, and that's to deal with the situation where we have, sometimes 12 or 13 dogs in a very small amount of space, and the need to know. And I think, as John's shared with you earlier, we did have a situation, and I don't know how many, but we know of one situation with a city employee whose dog was killed downtown this summer, and there was no way to really know and track back to who it was immediately and whether it had rabies or not had rabies. And so I think there were significant consequences that came from that. So we're saying if you're going to come into a dense environment with pedestrians and other dogs, it needs to be licensed that day.
That's one more added thing to the signage.
Yeah.
That needs to be made perfectly clear, because the Saturday market, we get a lot of people that aren't regular citizens of Eugene that come in from all over the place that need to know that ahead of time. Thank you.
Greg?
Thanks, Mayor. I'm going to kind of take these in order. As far as the security camera is concerned, I have issues with around collection of data, storage of data, the issue of profiling. And I'll take you back about 25, 30 years, because when I came to Eugene, the Eugene Police Department was collecting data in terms of physical photographs of African-American men, and there was a book that was kept in the department that I understood was later destroyed. And so I think that there are some serious civil liberty issues that could be in play here if this is A, not done correctly, B, is not, the data is not handled appropriately, and that the protocols are not in place to be able to assure citizens that their civil liberties and civil rights are not being abridged. So those are some major concerns I have around that. I would also like to see data as far as the usage in other public spaces that are quote unquote best practices in other cities and how those civil liberties issues are handled. Temporary closure of the of areas of the park blocks. I'm not quite sure how to navigate that at this point. And the reason being is because I think there are appropriate times when areas of the park blocks probably need to be temporarily closed or temporarily suspended from usage. But we need to have a specific set of protocols in order to trigger that kind of action. And, and I think that, it becomes a real slippery slope in terms of what activities are prohibited versus what activities are prohibited and then triggers closure of any specific area of the park blocks. So I'm not at all completely opposed to that, but I think that we have to be very circumspect in terms of how we approach that from a policy and a practice perspective. As you all know, I am very much in favor of expanded smoke-free areas. I think it is one of the things that enhances people coming down to downtown. I've had numerous emails. I think we all have. Oh, I'm out of time. So round two, Mayor.
Okay. I'm going to dash through my thoughts too. I said this before, but I'll repeat it again, that I think that some of the behavioral issues we see cannot be solved by public safety. They just, because they're freedom of speech issues. And I can remember in the past when we used to say this a lot when I was growing up, you know, watch out for those construction workers. They say all kinds of things about your body and your look and so forth as you're moving along the street. And we changed our societal response to that, where we said as a society, that's not okay with us. And it became clear to everybody. How we do that, I don't know, but I think it requires that kind of, here's what we find acceptable, and we're going to call you on it if we see you doing otherwise. So, and that's sort of a community response, I think. I was thinking about those four corners in the Bermuda zone, and we've been talking about it this morning, that, you know, think of those corners, or whether you can do some pop-up stuff there that sort of sinks around the four corners so that they get used in positive ways that displace the negative activity. I think police are the most expensive response we can have to some of the things that we're dealing with, and I know the chief's really aware of that. So I look at this and I wonder if we should be trying to send out the outreach team more and not count on our expensive officers as much for the kind of work we've been doing downtown. I also wonder why we only have one meter for collections. That seems like we ought to have them multiple ones, and it seems like they ought to be colorful, and they ought to really make a statement about what they're there for. And I kind of believe around the benches and the restrooms, it just kind of requires this thing we've learned over time, that if you don't get it right the first time, just keep going till you figure out how to do it the right way. Don't stop and say, well, that doesn't work, or it attracted the wrong thing. I think it's really about trying to find the right way, and we can't find the right way unless we keep working at it. And again, I will join everybody else in saying I've been asking for behavioral expectation signs for a long time, and we don't have them. So, and then closure of areas, which I don't like the notion of, but I kind of agree with Greg on that. If you find that you need to do them, make it the exception instead of the rule, that there's something that triggers that, and you get that response, and everybody knows what that is, and then you go back to because otherwise you're punishing, as we do, the people who are everyday people who want to use those spaces. So so now it's the second round is Mike, you're up again.
Thank you, Mayor. I agree with a lot of that. I want to drill down a little farther on what I think are the difficult part of this conversation, and the Mayor touched on it just now. Two of my colleagues mentioned something else that set this up perfectly. One of the things Chris mentioned was there's some, it's kind of a two-pronged approach here, and he's right, that there are some things around which we have to say, nope, those behaviors, we're not going to accept that, you can't do that. And then Betty mentioned the idea that if people will behave better, if you give them the opportunity to behave better, as Mayor's mentioned many times, and here's the part I want to talk about. We often have discussions about a focus towards the positive of, let's reimagine the space, let's put more programming into it, let's talk about how we can create more opportunities for people to behave the way we want them to, give them more services, give them things that they need. We are very uncomfortable as a council talking about the behaviors that we want to see stop and the manner in which we'd like to see them stopped. That's the hard part of this conversation that I think this council has to have. We're willing to do it with one of it. Some people would consider smoking around other people antisocial behavior. We're willing to say, we should talk about saying you can't do that anymore. We should have the rest of the conversations about antisocial behaviors at this table that we don't think are acceptable for people to do in our downtown. And if it's not to create it as a law enforcement issue, it's to say by what creative new means, other than offering somebody an opportunity to do otherwise, must we insist that they stop doing what they're doing? One of the things that's interesting to me is that I'm no psychologist, mind you, but I understand human behavior, that everybody's motivated to some degree by one of two things: an opportunity to move towards something or a need to move away from something. In other words, you can offer people all the opportunities in the world, but if they make their own decisions about how to act only because they need to, for whatever reason, you can't motivate them by offering them all the opportunities in the world. There are some folks who are motivated primarily by what is expected that they have to do or that they must stop doing. And if we're going to be effective at this, I think we have to talk about, at least, the full spectrum of what motivates people to behave in ways we'd not like them to, and how do we create the best tools for stopping that. Thank you.
George, you're next.
Thanks, Mayor. Well, I've got a few more questions, and I'm looking at page 4 of the AIS, the second horizontal column down, and it says, there's a phrase, it's in the middle column, second row down, explore partnerships to provide training and mentorships to workers that may experience barriers to employment. I don't understand what that means, especially.
I think I'm not looking at the right page, so my page.
It's page 4 of the attachment A, but it's page 10 of the council.
Secure or attach.
AIS. It's talking about additional downtown maintenance staff, but then it kind of morphs into this other sentence, which kind of, I don't know, maybe it was just snuck its way in there. It doesn't seem.
No, I see it. I didn't write this particular item. I think this was around the idea that some have shared that there's, people have talked to us about why wouldn't we consider using some of the homeless people to also be attendees in the restroom or employed in downtown, or provide employment opportunities for people that are having a difficult time. There's some sort of a barrier to otherwise being employed, and that we should consider that as something to explore.
Yeah, that makes sense. Thank you. I didn't understand exactly what that was doing there. And then down below that, jump down 2 more rows. Secure or attended storage facility, explore options and partnership opportunities to provide secure storage facilities in or around downtown. And I'm wondering, storage for what and for whom?
That conversation has come up around people being able to store their stuff. So if you're downtown, you're either traveling or homeless, and you don't have any place to put your things, it's very difficult to apply for jobs. It's very difficult to get services. You often lay with them on the sidewalk or in the park with you. And so there's been, we did a pilot with St. Vincent de Paul, you might remember, several years ago around winter strategies, where they built a locker facility like this that they have at their facility on Highway 99, and there's been some discussion about could we expand something like that in the downtown. And most recently, I've heard people talking about trying to pair that up with potentially being a tended restroom, locker, needle drop, whatever those things are, that you could cluster some of those activities together. And so what we'll do is explore those. And, I think it'll be like some of the other discussions we have. Finding the right location that everybody feels good about will be the challenge, but there's an interest in pursuing that.
Well, thank you. Yeah, all those things are good ideas. I mean, I think the safest storage, though, for anyone is at a safe spot. If you have a place where, obviously. And Councilor Pryor and I visited one of them a couple weeks ago, and I'd not been there since its inception, and man, it was just like, it was really a good place. The improvement from day one to the way it is now is unbelievable. And so I'd just like to say one more time, we need more of those. Well, okay, I think that's it for all my questions, and now I have an opinion, and I'm looking at security camera and temporary closure of areas in the park blocks. I just think, if you're talking about closing off part of the park blocks and removing the awnings, it reminds me of the 60s, Vietnam era strategy. We had to destroy the village in order to save it. We removed the amenities because undesirable people congregate there. Now you've denied it to everybody else in town, just like quote unquote normal people. And so I don't think I could support that. The camera, I share some of Councilor Evans' concerns. It seems like if no one's going to be monitoring them, why have them? I mean, why not have a policeman cruise by? That'll be an expense, but we're budgeted for that to a degree, because someone's going to have to review it later. Anyway, you're going to have to pay somebody to go through all of the tapes, and so I don't know if there's a cost saving there. It seems like kind of a duplicate. And then my guess is then I'm about ready to go over. I just have one more real quick round if we have time.
See how we do. Okay, Claire, you're next.
All right. So yeah, I'll share my thoughts on these 4 strategies there. I am not supportive of the security camera idea. I really do think it will just move the problem to another location where the cameras are not located. At the police commission, there was some discussion about piloting this outside the downtown library, maybe focused on the bike racks to help discourage bike theft. For me, that would be a much more rational use of that pilot program, because that's a fixed location. People are locking their bikes up there. We know that's a target. Just general surveillance of people in our parks is not something that I'm supportive of. And closing the parks, I worry about equal protection issues here. I would be more supportive of making actual physical changes in the park. I know that's a longer term project, but that encourages better uses of the space. I mean, I cannot dispute that there's a negative environment created when one group of people decides to monopolize a public area and make others feel unwelcome there. So I totally recognize the problem, but that's not a strategy that I can support at this time. I just think it would create another conflict point with those folks who are already using the space now. I'm willing to pick up the conversation about expanding smoke-free areas. That has some challenges also, but I think there could be support for that, so I'd be interested in looking at that further. The dog licensure thing, so would the proposal be that if someone's within that map of downtown, whatever the boundary is we decide, and it's discovered their dog is not licensed, they would get a citation right then? Is that the idea?
Well, that isn't normally how we do enforcement in the downtown area, so they'd be warned, they'd be advised that they can't have an unlicensed dog in the downtown area and be given an opportunity to remove it. And be provided with all the material they need to understand how to get a license, and we've made it very convenient and affordable.
So, and we could do that now. I mean, that's what we're doing now, but people have a 5-day grace period.
Well, apart from excluding the dog and from the downtown area where there's higher
that would
congestion.
Be a new piece.
Yes.
Yeah. I have problems with that as well. Again, equal treatment, treating downtown significantly different from non-downtown in terms of our responsibility as dog owners. And this might be a totally terrible idea, but I wonder if another approach might be to create a rule that says you can only have 3 dogs within a certain limited area, or 4 dogs. I mean, some of it's the congregation of dog along with the individual dog and their individual owner. But right now we have a limit on how many dogs you could take to the dog park as an individual. That's a park. It's slightly different than the city streets, but I'm just trying to think of other ideas. Very quickly, I wonder if our human rights ordinance could be brought into play in terms of the verbal interactions that people are having. I know, racial and ethnic slurs, it's not necessarily just allowed willy-nilly. I would like a 3rd round if we have time for it.
Okay. Betty? And then
Thank you. There's a lot to talk about in one meeting, and I hope that we won't implement any of these serious things without more discussion. But the cameras, I had said before I didn't approve of them in the park blocks, but it was mentioned that on the bike racks, I think that'd be an excellent idea for the library, because that's a big bike stealing area. And I know of someone who lost a bike there and wondered why there weren't cameras when he came back out of the library. Food carts, I wonder why there are none in the park blocks. Has there been any attempt?
There was one in the park blocks a little bit earlier this year, and it moved into Kesey as soon as there was a space available. So we know that, I don't think that they had a great experience there.
And selling merchandise, I asked you about that yesterday, you and John, and isn't it legal to sell things on the street? You all got an email from someone who's concerned about that, I think. Who?
Do you want to answer that?
Certainly. So there, right now, the current administrative rules, what we're looking to do is remove what we don't feel is a good distinction that exists right now. So our administrative rules say you can't sell anything within the downtown activity zone without a permit. That's in the code. You jump to the rules, and the rules say those that can get a permit. And it creates a certain category of folks that can get a permit, and that is if you created the item yourself or you directly supervised the creation of it. And what that would mean is I could sell a book I wrote, but I couldn't sell a book you wrote. And I could get a permit to do that. And so what we want to do is remove that distinction, and everybody that wants to sell downtown needs to have a permit. So it's just taking away that distinction that we don't feel should be enforced.
Okay. How about Frog? Wasn't it?
So the frog case that
That was the frog law.
So that was, and that again had the distinction. And so that was a case that said you cannot.
He was making it.
Because in that case, you could get a permit to sell balloons, but you couldn't get a permit to sell the joke books. And so what they said was you can't make a distinction against these equally protected. So that's the same approach we're taking right here is we need to remove that, and it's a carryover from Saturday market rules, right? It was intended to support the Saturday. So that's because people are like, why is that there? And it's a carryover from when we were creating the Saturday market situation. So what we want to do is exactly in line with the fraud case and remove that distinction and say everybody needs to get the $50 permit. Everybody's eligible to get that, and then they get some of the information that's useful for them, like here's where you can be on a sidewalk, here's where you can't be.
And will there be a clarity about whether they have to have made it themselves or not?
That will be the piece that's removed.
Oh.
Everybody. So I could go get a permit after we make the revisions to the rules. I could go get a permit to sell your book. I could get a permit to sell my
John could take his tie off and sell it down there.
book. With a permit, yes, he can.
Yeah. Okay.
Finding customers.
About the dog license, I agree every dog should be licensed because they need the rabies shots, and if you get the license, that means you have the rabies shot. But would they have to wear the license?
So that's a part of our current code requires that our dogs licensed.
I mean, do they have to wear it? It clanks if you wear it next to the name tag.
I believe that's currently a code provision.
Really? Well, okay.
And if I could make also just one distinction, I know we've talked about why, speaking specifically of downtown, there is some precedent to kind of looking at our city in different ways. There's a complete prohibition on dogs on Alder Street in that area because of kind of the dense area and the number of dogs. And so it does exist currently in our code to the extent you want to kind of look around at different areas and see should we take different approaches depending on what's happening.
I don't know about that. That's one thing I said was stupid, the dog thing, and lost a supporter first time I ran for office. But and I tried to get it removed, and I still think we should remove it, that restriction. But that's another matter. That's not downtown. I wonder if there's any follow-up on the people that have been helped by court to see whether they were really helped.
There was, during the program, during the pilot project, we were following up with them. Not everybody remained in housing, and I don't know exactly what those numbers are.
I like to wonder, I always wonder, did it really work with
some people?
Yeah. And then the other item we're talking about the arts, and I think we really ought to concentrate on supporting the arts, and I think that the city should have done something to help what was the place?
New Zone.
New Zone, that when they had to close, and Jacobs Gallery, we should have made greater efforts to keep that. And the arts it's getting pretty sparse. If we have a First Friday art walk, there isn't a lot left to see. And if we want to say that we're encouraging the arts, then we ought to actively try to keep what we have, and as well as to get more. And that's all I have, except I do think we should congratulate the people who were just elected.
So too.
Are you going to do that?
So I actually had my list before we started this meeting, so it's congratulations to Chris, to Betty, to Claire, right? That's
Yeah.
3?
That's the 3.
And Emily,
But Emily
Lucy.
hasn't been sworn in yet.
but she's been elected.
Yes, she has been elected.
Okay, congratulations to Emily and Lucy. Thank you.
All right, so, and yes, congratulations to everybody who won, and look forward to your serving on our council. So I've got Greg, and then Alan and Chris.
Okay, picking up a little bit where I left off, expanded smoke-free areas. I'm in concurrence with Councilor Polling on this. I do think that we need to make sure that as we are expanding our smoke-free areas, which does encourage more engagement with downtown by our citizenry, we also need to be mindful of those people's rights to smoke and how we actually space out and create those areas for them to do that. The second thing is going back to one of Claire's points is I think that the landscape architecture and what we have passed under urban renewal to put more investment in the park blocks may make a difference in terms of how they are used and utilized. So I'm looking forward to creative infrastructure that will encourage the appropriate behavior and discourage inappropriate behavior in the area. And as far as licensure of dogs, so I have a question of staff. A, do we have a leash law? B, I think it's incumbent for us to put more emphasis on the control of dogs by their owners. And so where are we at with those two issues, leashes and control by owners? Because, if it's in the owner's custody and it's not being properly controlled, then there needs to be another level in which we are holding dog owners accountable.
And the chief can speak to this as well. We do have provisions regarding that. There's a dog at large provision. There are leash laws.
Yeah, we enforce both of those. What we're trying the problem we're trying to solve with this is the congestion of pedestrians, bicyclists, and the chronically homeless who are all gathered together in one place in pretty close quarters. And this proliferation of dogs, many of which are not licensed. We don't know if they have rabies shots. And so we're trying to create a safer environment. And what we know from the people who live, work, and visit downtown is that one of the most significant things that makes it feel unsafe to them, and I'm not talking about appearances, I'm talking about the behavior of the animals, is the high concentration of dogs that are probably 90% of the time well-behaved, but those remaining 10% of the time behaving in ways that's pretty upsetting. So it's not unlawful to have an unlicensed dog in Eugene because of the grace period. We're just trying to make the downtown feel safer for everyone.
I agree with that. I think that we really need to emphasize universal dog licensure throughout the city, because there are other areas in our neighborhoods that become problematic with dogs, not to the extent that they are downtown because of the issues that you raised, Chief, but still there are other areas that from time to time are challenging because of owners not controlling their animals appropriately. And the last thing I'll say is that, you know, we do a universal dog licensure. I know that my cat has told me she's jealous of that idea and feels left out from her canine friends. So
We'll add cat licensing to the list.
I mean,
Good luck with that one.
Yeah.
Okay, Alan, and then Chris.
Walking down the four that are brought up for discussion today, I have concerns. I'm not supportive of the camera for the issues already discussed by Betty and Greg in particular. Very targeted anti-theft uses seem appropriate rather than just general surveillance. Concerns about not supportive of the temporary closure. It seems like taking a public space off the table for everyone seems going a little bit too far. Unless what you're talking about was a temporary closure of the space in the efforts to make the park blocks more safe and more welcoming, say like a pilot program for a month, and seeing how that happens, seeing what happens, how it goes. If it makes it more safe and welcoming, that's a different story than doing it on a ongoing basis. I'm okay with the expanded smoke-free areas, depending on exactly where you're talking about and how they get enforced. Waiving the dog license 5-day grace period only downtown seemed very targeted, punitive, and not about the dogs. I fully understand the vicious dog issue, and the person's dog who was killed by a vicious dog is a real tragedy. I can only imagine how awful that would be if it were my dog. And I've had my dog attacked by a vicious dog in a neighborhood. So I think we should take up that issue about vicious dogs and dangerous dogs as a separate issue and apply it citywide in the neighborhoods just as much as it is a downtown issue. I like the idea of exploring, if we're talking about the congregation of too many dogs in a space that makes people feel uncomfortable, maybe the idea is not to just enforce this dog license rule kind of arbitrarily downtown only, but work on the limitation of dogs in the area. Can we do that? Is that and of course we need to enforce the leash law, but can we do a limitation of number of dogs as opposed to just
I just don't know how we would do it.
Yeah.
If there were 10 dogs, which 5 would we decide to remove? You know?
Yeah.
I don't know how we would do that.
It's a good question.
So on your, oh, go ahead.
I was going to say that you probably already know that there is there are only 2 places in Eugene that have this kind of concentration of pedestrians. The other one is the West University Business District, where we do have a rule about dogs, and it's been very effective. Neighbors are allowed to have dogs there. This is much less restrictive. This proposal is much less restrictive than that.
I was going to clarify on the motions that we had prepared that I know I don't think you have. The way that it was worded around the park structures was moved to support the temporary closure of the areas under and around the concrete awnings in the park blocks, except for when the awnings are being used for permitted events as part of the effort to improve safety and discourage illegal activity in the area. And I'm only reading it to you because it was moved to support temporary closure, and it was, I think our intent was very much what you're saying, Councilor Zalenka, which is we just want to make sure you're okay with us temporarily closing these as needed to discourage illegal activities. It may be that they only need to be up for a little while, may need to be up until there's some further discussion about maybe a permanent removal as part of a park block renovation and different kinds of structures put in. But that was what it was intended. It was for you to support us doing that, not to direct us to go do it.
One more thing. I'm still unclear as to which of the other tools and strategies that were all listed in the AIS will be brought back for approval, which ones will be studied, which ones will be implemented. Maybe you could clarify that.
Yeah, I think it would probably be best if I provided that as a follow-up material, but as I went through the list after you asked that question, there's some in there that are really clearly would need to come back to council that have funding requests or they're larger partnerships. There's some in here, like, for example, the sidewalk commerce rules. We won't bring that back. That is an adjustment to the administrative rules, and we're doing it as we've kind of described it. So there's pieces in there around kinds of programming and things that we'll do as part of our regular business, but the things that we know are going to be things that are you've already brought up as a concern, just like the dog licensing piece or smoke-free or security cameras, we would bring those back.
Chris?
Thank you. Since everybody else is kind of going down the floor to give you a sense of where they are, and I'll do the same. On the security cameras in the park blocks, the way you've described it, it sounds not like a proactive system to prevent or stop crime. It sounds more like a reactive system to say, what do we do to catch the bad guy after the crime is already committed? And it seems like that's really not probably the best use for the money, at least not for now.
Yeah.
So a reactive system I don't think is necessarily that useful for me. Temporary closure of the areas of the park blocks. I think the long-term goal, and I think Claire mentioned this earlier, is the environmental design aspect. You know, I mentioned way back when, there's a lot of concrete, there's a lot of walls, there's a lot of obstructions in the park blocks that should be removed and turn it back into park blocks. And so that would be my long-term goal. That's what I would want to get to. Whether you need to shut them down because that is a long-term strategy, I don't know. It's kind of like, well, if Johnny does something bad, all the other kids have to suffer as a result of it, and that doesn't quite feel right to me. So I think rethinking that one and say, what could we do to try to provide better security along there without having to shut it down for everybody? I don't think it's a great design, but I don't want to shut it down for everyone. The expanded smoke-free areas, show me how that might work, and I'd be interested in talking about it some more. And then the last one, licensure required. I'm glad West University came up because that is an area where we actually have put that in place. And as you said, it seems to work pretty well, and this is less restrictive than that. But nevertheless, I would not want to do it because dogs are owned by homeless people. I would want to do it because dogs represent a safety risk. I mean, that would be the only reason to do it. And so I would need to know what exactly is the safety risk that this represents. Either through number of attacks, intimidations, whatever. And I don't think people have to actually be bitten for there to be a safety issue here. I think it's a matter of, can I walk down the street with 4 dogs there and feel safe and secure? So I would never want to think this was a way to clear homeless people out because they have dogs. But I think it would very definitely be a reason that I feel unsafe walking down the street with 4 pit bulls right there. And if 90% of them are acting great, I think that's something to know. If there are issues like librarians being attacked or dogs attacking other dogs, I think we need to know that. And that for me would be the reason to do it.
John?
Mayor, and I appreciate the conversation on the dogs. And I would be remiss if not one more time reminding, at least from my perspective, why this is important. And it really is a risk factor. And I appreciate the conversation around the owner has responsibility, for sure. I have no idea whether or not the dog owner that killed our employee's dog bit our employee and created a situation which she may have had to go through the entire rabies shot process, was homeless or not. I have no idea. I think they ended up getting a citation. It feels like there's a significant risk with a relatively easy solution. I understand the issues across the city probably needs to get addressed. Betty, my guess is you will not walk Lucy downtown in many parts of the downtown for this exact reason. And so it feels like to me that it's a broader policy conversation, but there are individuals that get impacted directly by not having or not ensuring dogs have rabies shots. And in a situation in which we know is unsafe with a congregation of such numbers of dogs. And so I'm just suggesting one more time that we at least have a further conversation about it.
And I appreciate that. In fact, that's why I would like to have this conversation expanded to include the entire community, because everybody deserves to be safe. Particularly around unlicensed animals.
So I think I've heard, and you can help me with this, is that people are willing to have a discussion about an expanded smoke-free area and the licensure issue. they're willing to have that discussion, and we can put that on the table to be sure that's true. That does not mean they're for it or against it. They're just willing to take a good look at that. The other two, the security camera and the temporary closure, I think you'll sort of have to analyze what you've heard around the table and see if there's any. I mean, I can certainly put it out there and they can tell you yay or nay, or you may want to take what you've heard today and see if there's another approach to either one of these. So that's what I need to know from you. I can certainly have Greg put the motion out. So tell me what you would like to do about that. Yes, George. I've got people in the queue.
In reference to the process that you just put out.
Okay.
Is the police commission currently doing work on the study on this, use of the camera?
No, the police commission worked through a draft policy that they recommended to the police department about a year ago. So we have this policy to work from that takes into consideration the issues that were raised today.
Well, I think we'd like to see, at least I would like to see what that policy is and how you would respond to it, and I think that would be worth a further conversation on this issue.
So I'm going to ask then, because of time, you put a motion out for the security camera, whether people want to have that further discussion on that or not. We'll the answer to that one. You put a motion out for temporary closure of areas at the park. Do we want to have more discussion on that? And then you can probably, I think, do this the 3 and 4 together. Seems to be some agreement on wanting to have further discussion on those. You want to do that?
I need because I don't have my.
What?
No, there is
There's no deal.
Okay.
She's got the motions. You're on the fly.
You got
have 'em.
I'm on the fly on this one.
Nope, we have them.
Got them if you would.
But they're not exactly what I just said.
They're not exactly.
They're not, but I can very easily do that.
Okay, good.
So, yeah.
Thank you.
Isn't it just to have another work session on all the issues?
We could. I mean, I'm just trying to help them
Well, those are pretty easy.
see if there's any of these that people don't want to come back again with.
And this would be a work session.
That's right.
You could read one at a time.
Okay.
Okay, so I move to have further discussion on the installation of security cameras in the park blocks as part of the effort to improve safety and discourage illegal activity in the area.
Second.
Moved and seconded.
And the temporary closure of areas under and around.
Is that that's a separate motion?
Separate motion.
Okay.
Yep.
All right.
Second.
All those in favor of this motion, please indicate. 1, 2, 3 in favor. In opposition? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So the direction is don't pursue that. Next one.
Don't talk about or don't pursue?
The motion was moved to have further discussion.
Have further discussion.
And people voted against having further discussion.
Doing it. Right? That's, I mean, I think that's a clarification.
That was a clarifying issue.
Yeah.
So the no vote means you don't just don't do it.
Right.
We won't be bringing it back.
Okay.
And I move the temporary closure of areas under and around the concrete awnings in the park blocks, except for when the awnings are being used for permitted events as part of the effort to improve safety and discourage illegal activity in the area.
So I didn't hear the word, I move for further discussion.
Yeah, that's what I was saying. I move for further discussion.
Okay. Moved and seconded. Mike?
Thank you, Mayor. I think on all of these, we're going to, if we end up coming back talking about them, for me, what I was trying to get to earlier is that it's the behavior that we're talking about that's the problem. It's not that as a potential solution. We're having cart before the horse kind of discussions here. I don't mind people congregating. I mind people congregating and behaving badly. I mind people congregating, blocking a walk, having dogs that scare people, there are behaviors that are antisocial we want to talk about, and I don't know at this moment if we have agreement on what those behaviors are that all of us or a majority of us might find distasteful or antisocial, and then what are the best solutions for how to deal with that, and whether closing that is the right answer or not. So I know that's a harder discussion, but I think that's the one this council needs to have, is our expectations of people's behaviors downtown, independent of their status, independent of, you know, whether their housing status in any way, because the law should apply to all of us evenly.
Before you respond, I'd like to move to extend our
We
discussion.
already have a motion on the table, so maybe we just need a nod of the head here.
Go ahead, Mayor. Extend this
Extend time for
another 5 minutes, yeah.
Everybody okay?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, we're back to the motion on the table. All those in favor, please indicate. 1, 2, 3, 4. In opposition, 5. 1, 2, 3, 5. And in opposition, 1, 2, 3. It passes. So that one comes back to us again. And then the third motion.
I move to hold a work session and direct the city manager to schedule a public hearing on adopting smoke-free areas in the downtown activity zone.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor, please indicate. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. In opposition, 1, 2, 3. It passes. That one moves forward. Next.
I move to direct the city manager to hold a work session on code amendment that requires any dog brought into downtown activity zone to be licensed.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor, please indicate. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. In opposition, 1, 2, 3. It passes. So those are moved forward. All right, that's it, I think, for today. Thank you.
Thank you.